Hey, I'm going to show you my palette for this current painting. This is going to be the largest painting in my show coming up on April 5th. And I've chosen a very specific palette for it. It starts with titanium white, pretty standard. It's hard to go wrong with titanium white. I'll probably need way more than that, but I'm just going to start with that amount. I've gotten 2 yellows, which is a little bit unusual because this is a pretty limited palette, but I'm using this fairly cool lemon yellow primary and this much warmer Hansa yellow deep. So the lemon yellow is fairly opaque and the Hansa yellow is transparent. For this project, I'm painting over metal and there are going to be a lot of layers, so I prefer to use primarily transparent pigments. But I do need a little bit of opacity for certain stages. Now I've got a carmine, which is a fairly cool red. That's also part of the reason why I have the 2 yellows. I've got blue and black are pretty cool, obviously. The first yellow is a cool yellow, and the red is a fairly cool red. So having a warmer yellow to add into the mix helps with a lot of the mixes I'm going to be doing later. Now I've got 2 paper palettes out because I'm going to be mixing a lot. So I prefer to have one palette with everything laid out and then another palette that I can mix on. And I like to use these disposable gray palettes. Now to start with, I'm going to go ahead and mix some of my secondaries. Now you'll notice that this carmine is really strong. So approximately equal quantities of the red and the blue still end up with a pretty reddish mixture. And this is manganese blue, by the way, which I've also chosen for very specific reasons. I, in fact, made color charts for this painting long before I decided which ones to use, where I compared most of my blues, yellows, reds. I was aiming for a slightly CMYK palette, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black. And that enables me to have a little bit of a more luminous effect for the final painting, which allows the copper to shine through. I'm going to add a tiny bit of black. And a lot more blue. Now, I'm going to be painting primarily flesh tones and neutral clothing for this painting, but I specifically used a mixture of bluish purple lighting on, pink colored skin, which means there are a lot of cooler purple tones. So while I don't necessarily need this much purple, I'm going to go ahead and use it in a lot of different places to have a little bit of a vibrancy to the flesh tones and to the shadows. So that's fine for now. And I'm just going to wipe off a little bit of that. The main thing I'm going to need for this painting is going to be a flesh tone. So I'm going to use a large quantity of the yellow, some of the red, and we'll start with that to see what tone of orange we have. You'll notice that's pretty vibrant and definitely skews towards the red. The lemon yellow and the Hansa yellow are both fairly gentle colors as yellows go, but that red is really intense. So I'll save a little bit of this for later. I might want it for something else. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in more of the yellows. Now that's still a pretty red orange, but that's okay, because I'm going to use this for 2 different mixes. So half of it I'm putting over there. Half of it will get an extra dose of yellow. And now I've got much more of an in-between orange. And so I'm just gonna stick that right there. And this purple I'll go ahead and put there. Now I'm gonna want a dark flesh tone. And for the flesh tone, I'm gonna use this orange we just made with some of this purple and blue. I'm just using the purple because I have too much of it. I could just add straight blue with a little extra of the carmine. And you'll notice that as I've mixed almost all the colors in my palette into what I'm working with right here, it's basically become a brown color, which is great because that is what I'm going to need for the shadow tones on the flesh. And these are going to be approximate. The first layer of my painting is very approximate with color. It's just a general, you know, warm shadow, cool shadow, purplish, whatever. There will be a stage of reaction after the first painting that will transform the colors a good deal. So as long as I have the general tone, I'll be fine. Now I want to see what kind of skin tone that brown produces, so I'm going to add some white. And you can start to see, yeah, that's a pretty nice brown, a warm brown. It would be a little bit, it wouldn't quite be a Caucasian skin tone, but it's getting there. And the 3 models for this painting are all Caucasian, although a little bit of mixed ethnicity in there, but far enough back I can pretty much stick with a Caucasian tone for it. But it's also helpful to sometimes have a variety to your skin tone, so I could go ahead and use that, but I'm going to go ahead and mix more of it and mix it slightly more pink. Steal some more of that brown. And see, I added too much of the carmine, because carmine just loves to overpower things. But I am getting a little bit more of that gentle pink Caucasian tone, which is good. And if I wanted to mute this more, tone it down, I could add more blue. I could add more of the green yellow. I could add a little black. But that's a pretty nice tone. You can see it has a similar mix of hues as the shadows on my own skin, but obviously it's a lot darker. So I'll add a little of this over here, and that'll be my secondary skin tone. I'm gonna add in a big old pile of white. And I like to mix carefully to preserve pigment, so if I add white to this same place, it can pick up a lot of that pigment that's kind of gotten smushed into the paper. And that's really great for when I'm trying to make successive tones that all have some harmony and just mix into one another. And that is a pretty nice skin tone. The lighting on the camera, I don't know exactly how it will show, but generally speaking, that's pretty great. And for the record, I myself am one of the models in the photo that I'm using for this, because why would you not use yourself as a model? You don't have to pay yourself. So matching my skin tone will work perfectly, even though the other 2 models have a slightly different tone. Now, if I were doing the finishing touches on a hyper-realistic portrait, I would want to have a much wider range of skin tones. I would need basically everything from almost as dark as black to almost white with cools and warms. But since I'm just putting in the first layer of a painting, I can stick to, you know, 3 or 4 major tones, a medium tone, a dark tone, and a highlight, which is what I'm doing right now. And since I have my secondaries mixed, I can also throw in touches of those as needed if I need, you know, a bluish highlight or a purple shadow or whatever you might need. Now, I have not yet mixed any green. I very specifically chose this palette to mix a really nice purple, a really vibrant orange, and a nice teal green, because a lot of the reactions that I will do on my paintings involve a teal color. The reactions I'm going to do on this painting will involve sort of a minty green, and will also involve a nice rich purple. So that's part of the reason for incorporating a lot of purple into the shadows and skin tones, is so that the reaction and the paint will harmonize together nicely. And one of my favorite things to do is mix all of my paint, and after a painting session, I will just cover this, well, not this one in plastic wrap, and just gently press the plastic wrap down around each pile of paint, and then just close the top on that. And you can throw that in the freezer, and it will keep the paint fresh for a really long time. When you're ready to use it, just take it out about 30 minutes before you start painting, remove the plastic wrap, and then allow it to warm up, and you've got your paints almost as good as new. It delays the drying process considerably. So I don't really need a green right now, but I want to go ahead and mix it just so that you can see what it looks like. I'm gonna mix it in the center here because I don't mind if it gets a little contamination. Contamination produces color harmony, so. And you can see there, that produces a really nice, vibrant green. Add a little more blue so it's more towards the teal side. And if I want to tone it down, I can add a little red, but I'll let it pop a little more, so I'll add some more yellow. And now I've got a nice vibrant green. Probably won't really use that, but I'll put it on the side here. And what I will do is I'll mix a little mint green. And that's going to be basically a teal mixed with a little white. So it's a green that edges towards blue and then is very pale. That's a little too blue, so we'll just steal a little more of that green, a little more of that yellow. Yeah, that's nice. And now I've got this nice delicate mint green, which I will use. Well, of course, now I have no place to put it. We'll just toss that up here. It's not the best place for it, but you know, life happens. The nice thing about it is right next to the white, so if I need to mix those together to get a lighter hue, that'll be really easy to do. Now I've got all these kind of messy colors on here. I want a little bit of a pink. I'm going to go ahead and mix more of a pink tone here. So it's just got a touch of that orange in it. I'm going to put that between those two piles so that I remember that it's got orange and red. And then I want a little bit of a pink. And I went ahead and stole a piece of the white paint that had that little bit of green on it because I want to let that green kind of tone this down a little. It's a really warm color. I don't necessarily need it to be that warm. So there I've got a nice hot pink, and that, I don't know if I'm going to need that, but typically, as I'm looking at my reference photo on some of the arms of the figures, in between the light skin tone and the dark shadow tone that bridges into purple, there is a nice hot transition line where it's a lot more saturated. It's more pink or orange depending on which model. And so having some more saturated flesh tones is really helpful because you can just pull those in and brighten up those transitions, and that creates a really vibrant painting. Now, as I'm looking at this, I'm not super happy with the shadow tones I have. I think what I would need is a little bit more variety of the shadow, maybe a little bit more towards a brown blue as opposed to a purple or a straight up orangey brown. But I'm not going to worry about that too much right now because it's really not that important at this stage of the painting. What I will do is create some grays. So one of the models is wearing a gray dress and the other two are wearing black dresses with different textures. And so I'm going to need some gentle dark grays to just suggest the folds of cloth. It's not going to be a major focus of the painting, but I will need some suggestion of form. Oh, and I have just thrown paint everywhere. That's always fun. And since I just need a gray, I just threw that on top of those other colors so that it would pick up some of them. And that's probably still pretty close to black, so I'm just gonna move it over here and pick up some of this. An important note is if you're trying to mix a dark color and it needs to be a little bit lighter, you want to start with a dark tone and then add tiny bits of light. If you're going to mix a light tone, start with the light and add tiny bits of dark. If you try to just throw all your ingredients together, you'll often end up somewhere in the middle, kind of a muddy color. So you want to be really gentle when adding lights to dark or darks to light. Now on the camera, I don't know if this actually looks gray, but it is. It's just a nice, gentle, silky gray. I'm just going to set that right there. And that'll help me delineate while I'm working the different folds. And then now I'm throwing in a little bit of white. I'm just going to pick all this back up. And we'll have a slightly lighter gray. Now one of the grays in the painting or in the photograph is pretty warm, and Mars Black that I'm using here is cool. So this gray right here is a pretty cool gray, and I'll need that for certain places. I also am going to want a warm gray, so I'm going to pull in some of this brown shadow and wipe that across there and see what that produces. Now that is pretty interesting, and it's actually not far from the gray that I need, but I notice it is a little bit on the green side, probably from the blue of the black plus the greenish yellow. So what I will do is I'll add a little bit more of the black and then some of this orange. Now, if you want a vibrant color and also a fairly realistic color that harmonizes with others, it's a good idea to try to add other lights before you add white. Just adding straight white to another color ends up with usually a kind of artificial look, which is part of why I'm adding in some of this pink up here. I'm using mixtures that have yellow in them, so I can let the yellow warm it up instead of just straight adding white to it. Now that's a little bit cooler. I'm gonna add a little more of the orange. So looking at that, that's pretty good for the transition tone. I'll set that right there. And then I'm going to have a little bit of a lighter tone, a little more of that orange for the highlight of the gray fabric. And I notice this is looking a little green. What I really need is some more of that Hansa yellow. Or I could just add some straight carmine. I want to be gentle with that because it's so strong. And that is pretty good. It looks a little greenish still here, but when I throw it over here, it has a nice warmth to it that I really like, and also a little touch towards the green is not a problem since green will be a dominant theme of the reaction tones. So I'm pretty happy with that. Then I'm just going to steal the last of this white because I don't need it for anything else that I'm mixing. I'm just going to pick up a nice neutral from this palette. I always like to have a wide range of neutrals to choose from because especially in a situation where you have a lot of neutral clothing, so I've got gray, black, and then another form of gray, and also some tan, which I might or might not use. The lights and shadows on those neutral tones will have a lot of subtle variety, and if you want to make it really look real, you have to have all these slightly green grays, slightly brown grays, slightly blue grays, slightly purple grays, and use them very carefully, alternating those warms and cools in order to get the most effective mixture. So now I'm about ready to start actually painting, you know, shockingly. Interestingly, I've spent hours and hours on this painting already, and I don't even have any paint down on the copper. Sometimes people ask me, do you paint every day? And I say, no, I'm lucky if I get to paint twice a week because the rest of the time is spent mixing paint or preparing a canvas or ordering supplies or doing taxes or talking to clients or going to gallery shows or submitting grant proposals. And I honestly have to really fight to get time to paint at all, which is funny since painting is the only thing that actually earns money. But sometimes it's nice just to have a session of mixing paint. It gets you into thinking about the subject you're about to paint, but it's not quite the level of mental energy of actually trying to apply the paint. And so it's a good stepping stone, or if I can just, okay, I've mixed all my paints. I don't have to paint yet. I can take a break afterward, but everything's set out and ready so that when I am prepared to sit down and put paint onto my surface, everything is just how I need it, and I can just dive right in. I think the maximum amount of time I've spent just mixing paint for a painting was about an hour and a half. So that tells you something about my work life, or my painting balance. Thanks for tuning in as I showed you some of my painting preparation process, and hopefully I'll have some videos showing this actual painting taking form later.